Okay, this is the 4 voice class. This is practice. I'm going to do this at 200 words a minute. We have Mr. Olds for the plaintiff, Mr. Graves for defense. Let's identify.
I'm attorney for the plaintiff, Mr. Olds.
I'm the witness.
I am the court.
I am Mr. Graves for defense. And we're going to read in 15, sir.
15.
Yeah, Mr. Olds.
Mr. Olds, for the record, do you recall what time?
I went to work at 8 o'clock.
Okay. Upon arriving at work, Mr. Post, did you notice anything unusual about the facility?
Yes, it had obviously been broken in and stripped off laboratory goods.
Can you articulate to the best of your recollection any indication that you saw that the place had been broken into?
Well, yes, there was a bit of laboratory materials on the northern side of the control house on the ground. One door had been left propped open on the south side of the building. A door had been entered into a gas injection room, and it's a sealed room that has a large viewing panel that you can see from the main control house into the gas injection room. It's a heavy-duty glass. It had been busted out.
All right, Mr. Post. Did anyone have permission to enter your treatment facility between 5 o'clock p.m. on the 14th and when you arrived the next morning?
No.
Did anybody have permission to take any of the equipment that you had there in the facility?
No.
Did you have occasion, Mr. Post, to go to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department for the purpose of identifying property that was potentially taken from the treatment plant?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to have 2 more photographs marked People's next in order.
Okay, 5 and 6.
Mr. Post, I'm about to show you what has been marked People's 5 for identification. I would like you to look at that photograph and tell me if you recognize what is depicted therein.
Yes, I do.
What is that, please?
It's the majority of, say, maybe half of the items that were stripped out of the laboratory, mostly laboratory items, scales, recorders, microscopes, as well as the edge of 2 .22 caliber rifles that myself and another operator possessed in our lockers.
And you personally went down and identified the items that are depicted in that exhibit?
Yes, I was present when that picture was taken.
Okay. Showing you what has been marked as People 6 for identification, do you recognize that? What's depicted in that photograph?
This is just one more of the same kind of overview to the left of the first one, showing tools that are marked with EID engravings on them.
EID standing for what?
El Dorado Irrigation District extraction rack and tools in a tool chest that was also marked that had been taken from another facility other than the one that I work at.
And were all of the items that are depicted in People's 5 and 6 returned to you when you made the identification?
All but one, and we recently picked up that one.
Okay. Mr. Post, do you have independent knowledge in regards to the equipment that was taken from the facility to the value of the equipment?
Yes, I do.
And can you give us an estimate as to the value of the equipment?
Yes, I am responsible for purchasing the equipment and such, and the value as replacement value through VWR, which is our main supplier, is in excess of $20,000.
How much in excess, Mr. Post?
21, 22 ballpark.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Graves.
Good morning, sir. What was the most valuable item which was taken during the break-in?
There was a Bosch & Lomb 710 instrument valued at a little over $4,000.
That was replacement cost to you if you had to go out and buy one?
That's right. That's a fairly new unit. In fact, all the equipment was quite new.
Could you perhaps, if you could, draw a diagram of the structure which was broken into on the paper over there for me?
Do you want to move that chair a little bit and angle the blackboard so that I can see it, sir?
This is kind of a mess. This is the lab area here.
Okay, and maybe if you could orient me a little bit as to the building. Okay. If I could approach the witness, Your Honor. What's this area here?
This is the control room. That's where we have mostly control panels, and basic operations of the plant are carried out here.
And how about right below that?
Right below here is the chlorine injection room, and that's a sealed room. Gas does not go into the main portion of the control room.
And below that, sir?
This is chlorine storage room where we store cylinders, weighing devices, and such. There's a mirror, an observation window between these 2 rooms, here, and there's an observation window between the control room and the chlorine injection room.
And I take it you have eliminated this line here?
Yes.
What's this area here?
This is a workroom. We had some of our professional effects, some sort of things there.
Is that basically a hallway in between there?
This is a hallway through here. This is a little out of scale here, but this is essentially a bathroom.
Okay.
There's an exterior door here going out.
Now, could you show me where you found the point of entry to be?
The point of entry was through this corridor to this point to a fairly heavy-duty window that was wire reinforced, had been busted out into this room, and then the individual or whatever had climbed through over a workbench that had assorted work items.
And I take it that most of the items that were taken came from the laboratory and the workroom?
Yes, from the laboratory. The majority of them were taken from the laboratory. Some were taken from this room here, and I don't recall that anything was taken from this room, although it was obvious they had been in that room.
Okay, now does this building exist in a fenced area or is it an open area?
It's fenced.
Okay, this will be some more warm up. And we have Mr. Mozessian for the people, Mr. Chinello for defense. Let's identify.
I'm attorney for the plaintiff, Mr. Mozessian.
I'm the witness.
I'm the court.
I am defense attorney, Mr. Chinello.
Mr. Mozessian, for the record, is it most reasonably certain that you had your lights on low beam since you were following the other cars that night?
Yes.
By the way, did you notice the street lights there in the area?
I recall that there were street lights.
Do you remember where they were located?
No.
You remember where they were on the west? Strike that. The north side of Dakota or the south side of Dakota?
I do not.
Excuse me, I think we'll take our recess at this time for 15 minutes. Again, during the recess, ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind and abide by the admonition. Do not discuss the case. Be back in 15 minutes. You may continue, Mr. Mozessian.
May I ask the court reporter to read back the last question and answer?
You may.
That was the street lights we were talking about, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
Now, directing your attention to the time, is there something that happened? Either you had an appointment or a schedule or something that lets you know what time this accident happened that recalls the fact to you?
I do not recall a specific appointment, no.
What is your best recollection as you sit here today of the time, the approximate time that this happened?
I would say close to 9:30. It was after 9 o'clock in the evening.
Doctor, do you traditionally wear a watch?
Yes.
And did you have a watch on that night?
Yes.
And did you have a watch on that night?
I can't assume that I did.
Do you have any recollection of having looked at your watch just to memorialize the time of this incident in your mind?
No, I looked at it, as I recall, for taking her pulse.
Do you recall what time it was when you took her pulse?
I don't.
Would it have been after 9:30?
I don't recall.
And again, just to get the time frame in mind, when you were there with the lady taking her pulse, there was no ambulance or police officers there. Is that correct?
No,
That is correct?
that is correct.
Do you recall identifying yourself to anyone as being a doctor?
Yes, to the man driving the automobile.
Would that be the defendant, sir?
I believe so.
And to anyone else, sir?
No, I do not recall anyone else.
Did you give your name to the man driving the automobile?
I don't recall that.
Did you have any of your business cards with you that night?
I don't recall that either.
Okay. Do you recall perhaps handing a business card to either the defendant or the officer or both?
I do not.
You don't think you did?
I don't recall.
Did you have any conversations with anyone other than the defendant or the police officer there at the scene that night?
Not that I recall.
And of course, I assume you talked to Mr. Anderson when this was going on?
We discussed it, as I recall, after leaving the scene of the accident.
Okay. He didn't approach the victim with you?
He did, yes.
Was he there when you took her pulse?
Yes.
Did you make any written notes of your findings as you examined the lady that night?
Not that I recall.
Okay. How big a pool of blood was there?
In diameter, something like this.
And how big is that, sir, in your opinion?
12 to 14 centimeters.
Was that coming out of her mouth?
That was lying by the side of her mouth.
Okay. So there was no material actually draining out of her mouth at the time you observed her?
Not that I recall.
At any time from the time you went through the intersection of Dakota and Fruit, did you look at your speedometer?
I do not recall looking at my speedometer.
Are there any schools in that neighborhood?
On that block, specifically between Fruit and Palm, no.
And how about back a little bit on Fruit? Are there any schools that you recall?
I'm going to object to the relevancy of this. I don't see the relevance.
It's preliminary, Your Honor.
I don't see the relevancy, Mr. Mozessian.
Would you like me to make an offer of proof outside the hearing of the jury or in the hearing of the jury?
If you think it's relevant, make it.
Yes. My offers of proof would be that there are marks on that street sign that indicate that when school is in session, the speed limit is to be 25 miles per hour.
Obviously, at 9 o'clock at night, school is not in session.
That's absolutely correct.
So the objection is sustained.
You got to let me finish my offer, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I base my offer on the fact that having children around the area is not unsimilar to having pedestrians, and it would establish some would have some relevance on the standard of safe speed, which is very relevant.
The objection is sustained.
May we ask for an instruction by the court to the jury that when an objection is sustained, they're not to consider the question?
Well, I would give that instruction later, but generally if a question is asked a witness and there is an objection to the question and the court sustains the objection, that means that the question is calling for evidence that is legally admissible for one of a great variety of reasons. And obviously a question asked a witness is not evidence and may be considered only as it gives meaning to the answer. So obviously a question is not to be considered by the jury, but only insofar as it gives meaning to an answer given by the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, you told us, sir, that when you observed the defendant, he was out of the car.
Yes.